For centuries, the handshake has been the universal man-to-man greeting in the West. Whether two men were meeting for the first time or old friends were catching up, it was universally understood that they would shake hands. But today, that's no longer the case. The standard handshake has been replaced by a confusing array of options, including dapping, elbow tapping, fist bumps, and even hugging. So why did men stop shaking hands? And is shaking hands still the right move for a modern gentleman in today's society? That's for us to find out in today's video. Hello, my name is James, and I am on a mission to create a generation of gentlemen. First, I think it's interesting to explore why we began shaking hands in the first place. There is evidence that men have been shaking hands as long ago as the 9th century BC. Take a look at this carving found in ancient Assyria, showing King Shalmaneser III and a Babylonian monarch clasping hands to seal an alliance. Even back then, it was understood as a sign of mutual agreement and peace. The ancient Greeks practiced the art of dexiosis, which was their term for shaking hands. It was seen as a gesture of goodwill and trust. And the ancient Romans also adopted the handshake, depicted in art and on coins as a symbol of friendship and loyalty. Gravestones also often featured images of the deceased shaking hands with family members, and this signified an eternal bond. The Romans also had a variation on the handshake, where each man would shake each other's forearm. And this comes back to the two ancient messages that the handshake sends. The first message is that it seals a bond, and the clasping of the hands is a perfect metaphor for this. But the other one is a more practical thing, which is just, I have no weapon. You can feel my hand, you can touch my forearm to see and feel that I am unarmed. So for the next several thousand years, the handshake was the dominant way for men to greet each other. And that was the case pretty much until the late 1960s. And since then, there have been two major catalysts for the decline of the handshake in the West. The first catalyst came about during the Vietnam War, when African American soldiers developed a new form of greeting and salutation, known as giving dap or dapping. Giving dap was kind of like a secret handshake that showed solidarity and unity among black soldiers. After the war, this spread throughout African American culture, primarily through music and through sport. And with social media and hip-hop culture permeating American life among Gen Z, my generation, it's become the go-to greeting for many young men today, regardless of their race. Giving dap, as opposed to a handshake, is somewhat of a signal of belonging. It's a way of showing other people that you're part of the in crowd, you're one of the cool people, and it's something that the older generations don't understand, and that's exactly the point. Another major catalyst for the decline of the handshake is simply the fear of germs. During the H1N1 outbreak in 2009 and the Ebola outbreak in 2014, this was the first time we saw alternative greetings such as fist bumps and elbow taps becoming more popular. But it really was COVID-19. Don't know if you remember that little thing. It was really COVID-19 and the response that signaled the serious death of the handshake in the West. And you've probably observed that even 5 years on from the pandemic, people are still much more hesitant about shaking hands than they were before. In fact, research published in 2023 observed that globally there was an increase of 54% in increased interpersonal distances. People simply don't want to get as close to each other as they did before. So not only have people developed these new habits of greeting, such as elbow tapping or fist bumping, but they're also simply more cautious about spreading germs through a handshake. And I won't lie to you, shaking hands is a pretty effective way of spreading germs. But as I'll point out later, I think this is outweighed by many of the psychological benefits to shaking hands. So why should you still shake hands? Why is it still the gentleman's greeting? Well, despite the rise of alternative greetings and fears of contamination, the handshake remains a potent symbol in both professional and social contexts. Research has proven that your handshake will significantly impact the first impression that you give, and a good handshake indicates confidence and trustworthiness. In fact, a study highlighted by Science Daily found that those who offer to shake hands are viewed more favorably than those who don't. And that's because the act of shaking hands subconsciously activates our neural circuits involved in trust and bonding. We form a solid impression of somebody within the first 7 seconds of meeting them, and a firm, confident handshake conveys respect, poise, and competence more than any words could do in that period of time. And I'd be very curious to know from you in the comments, how do you feel when somebody doesn't offer to shake hands? It's so important, especially in professional settings. If you have a strong, confident handshake, it shows that you are capable, that you're able to express yourself, and that you're able to do the job. But if you have a weak handshake, that communicates insecurity and shyness. And today, young adults are struggling to establish themselves because, among other nonverbal behaviors, of their weak handshakes. But think about it this way. For nearly 3,000 years, men have been shaking hands. It's only over the last few decades that these alternative greetings or hesitancy about shaking hands has come about. I am very confident that the handshake will endure as a timeless tradition, a way of showing respect from man to man. And from the Greek warriors and Roman statesmen to the guy you just met at the bar, shaking hands says, I come in peace and I meet you as an equal. In my opinion, a man who chooses to shake hands over an alternative greeting, that shows that he is a part of adult society. You know, teenagers dap, boys high-five each other, but a man shakes hands. And maybe you are a Gen Z man. Many of your peers avoid the handshake. They prefer different greetings. Why don't you lead by example? Because when you offer your hand to shake, it sets the tone for how you expect to be treated. And people remember a man who is confident enough to set the tone. Shaking hands isn't about being trendy or copying what other people do. It reflects dignity, maturity. It's the sign of a man who chooses class over conformity. And remember, you will use the handshake with everybody you meet, whether you're meeting the King of England or simply shaking hands with a taxi driver at the end of a long ride. So remember, we live in a world that's become too casual, too digital, too distant. Among all of this craziness, a simple handshake is a bold gesture of genuine presence and character. So I encourage you, next time you meet somebody new, no matter what their age, no matter where they come from or who they are, simply offer a firm, confident handshake. Gentlemen, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.